I'm Erin. I go to school at University of Minnesota Duluth, and I'm a senior.
I'm Michaela, and I go to UMD.
And where do you go to school?
Justin Myers. I go to Lake Superior College.
Cool. Where you go to school?
Okay, my name is Samantha Obi. I go to University of Minnesota Duluth.
So
Hi, my name's Hunter Harris. I'm a student at the University of Minnesota Duluth.
what's the best way to learn?
Repetition.
What's the best way to learn?
Just like hands-on practicing, especially with like math and the sciences, just studying and practicing. Repetition.
Repetition's good, yeah. Even I have used repetition as a way to learn, just as Sam and Hunter have. And there's a reason for that. A study was done in the late 1980s using PET imaging. The PET mapping method makes it possible to show which portions of the brain are active. Using this technology, a group of participants were asked to first just read words, and then they are asked to generate a use of a given word. For example, they would say pound when given the word hammer. They found that this second nature way of just reading a word activated one area of the brain, but when subjects had to make a new association with the word, then a different area of the brain was activated. To quote Posner on page 30, if the same list of words was repeated and participants made the same association, then the strength of the activations decrease. He goes on to say that after a few repetitions, producing the association resulted in the same brain activity as simply reading the word out loud. So the brain pathways functioned as though the association was directly connected to the image of the word. That just goes to show why repetition works and why practice works. We have experienced this in spelling tests, in memorizing historical dates, and even just practicing our math problems. Medina also agrees, stated on page 132, that repeated exposure to information in specifically timed intervals provides the most powerful way to fix memory into the brain.
Pace.
Cool. Any teachers that stood out to you in high school?
I guess Mr. Carr, because he made it fun. That's about all I can say.
Yeah. What was your most memorable learning experience in school, whether high school or college?
In high school, I had a really good physics teacher who I would stay after class with, and he would help me work through problems and understand it in a way that made a lot of sense. And then we also went on a trip to Chicago once, and so we got to see how all these equations and stuff got applied in real life, so that was really cool.
Oh, that is cool. Attention! What would you do if you walked into a classroom to find a radish on your desk? This is an example given by Judy Willis in 2010, page 52. She explains that the student's RAS, or reticular activation system, will be curious, and so their attention will promote intake of sensory input cues to the puzzle of this novel object on their desk. They will be engaged and motivated to discover why the radishes are there. She goes on to explain that the RAS admits sensory input associated with pleasure. So as students are enjoying and interested and excited about the investigation with the radishes, the required lesson content can flow through the RAS gateway to reach the higher cognitive brain. So this is exactly what Sam experienced when she took her trip to Chicago. She was enjoying and excited about the investigation and was able to learn physics a little bit better. John Medina also agrees that attention is important. And on page 79, he explains that emotions get our attention. Emotionally arousing events tend to be better remembered than neutral events. I mean, this may seem obvious, but how does this work in our brains? On page 80 and 81, he explains that it involves the PFC, the prefrontal cortex, and the amygdala. The PFC is our executive functions part, where problem solving, maintaining attention, and inhibiting emotional impulses occur. The amygdala is chock full of the neurotransmitter dopamine, and it uses dopamine the way an office assistant uses post-it notes. As John Medina explains, When the brain detects an emotionally charged event, the amygdala releases dopamine into the system. Because dopamine greatly aids memory and information processing, you could say the post-it note reads, "Remember this." Getting the brain to put a chemical post-it note on a given piece of information means the information is going to be more robustly processed. So again, it may seem obvious that attention is very important for us to learn, but so is emotions. Emotions get our attention, and we now know why this is true. Justin experienced this with his teacher, Mr. Carr, who he had an emotional connection with, and he was able to make learning more fun. Yeah. So, do you have any horror stories from high school or college?
Yes, getting in a fight with a teacher about an exam in front of the entire class.
So, how'd that fight go?
I didn't think a question was very fair, and I called her out on it in front of class, and she told me that she would give me the points back if I would have came after class, but since I did it in front of class, she took more points. Like, she just kept the points off.
I'm in school.
I mean, we had one math teacher who kind of followed us through our middle school and high school careers, actually, who was just like kind of an interesting person. She would like kind of snap sometimes. She always kind of was really mean to this one girl in class when I was in like 7th grade, which was interesting. It kind of made a little bit of a hostile environment.
Fear may be something we've all experienced, but hopefully never in the classroom like Sam and Hunter. Zull on page 60 says, "Some students freeze in fear when they find themselves in the cage used for experience in education, in other words, the classroom." But why do they freeze in fear is the question. Zull explains that it's because of the amygdala. The amygdala has an upper and lower pathway to it. When we were talking about emotions that get our attention, we discovered that the amygdala produces dopamine to help us remember positive emotional experiences. But what about negative emotional experiences like fear? Zull explains on page 59 that sensory data is processed through the amygdala, and then experiences are passed directly to the brainstem and out through the muscles of our body. This is when fight, flight, or freeze come in. Just as Hunter experienced, his fear of having a bad test score on his test produced his reaction of fighting. So why are we creating an environment in our classrooms that cause this fear? Zull also points out on page 61 that in education, using threat, punishments, and an attempt to achieve positive goals seems bound to fail because our amygdala will produce a response of fight, flight, or freeze and not release that dopamine for long-term memory that we need.
I can't use that example.
What was the most memorable in a good way experience?
Studying hard for a calculus test and receiving a grade that I thought that I earned.
Zull 2002, page 62 states, "Success is progress towards a goal and nothing succeeds like success. Achievement itself is rewarding, and that may simply be because it is recognized as a movement." Hunter was rewarded by his success after putting in hard work for his calc test. We've already talked about the amygdala and how dopamine is released when a positive emotions are experienced. This helps us transfer what we've learned into long-term memory. Zull in another source says, "It is success that matters, not the subject. Our goal should be to find some area of success for everyone." What's the best way to learn?
Just like hands-on practice.
I think like all the hands-on projects that I got to do.
Kinda.
Yeah. What's the best way to learn?
I'd say hands-on.
My most memorable learning experiences are when it's hands-on, so like in a lab where if we're like testing our muscle reflexes, we do it to ourselves.
Did you know that better fitness equals better attention? This is a quote from Rady, 2008, page 26. But why do you think that is? A study was done with a diverse group of kids, and they tested their attention before and after working out for a period of time. Reynolds, 2013, page 190, explains, as a result of all these workouts, blood flowed at a much higher volume to the hippocampus. Medina, 2008, page 103, explains that the hippocampus is specifically involved in converting short-term information into long-term forms. All of my interviewees had done a high school sport while in high school, and almost all of them expressed that doing hands-on activities was the best way for them to learn. This may be because doing hands-on activities in class gets kids moving around in a classroom and helps blood flow to the hippocampus and therefore to the long-term memory. Overall, asking ourselves what's learning is important. We've learned that repetition, attention, having a positive environment, rewards, and exercise is all important for our learning.